Samples play a vital role in understanding what the site was. So from archaeology, obviously, the initial thing we think about is what was the actual site for, and we think about recovering of artefacts and looking at some of the shiny goods that we find. Whereas some of the actual environmental remains can give us more information about how people lived and what they actually did in the past. The main reason why we take samples from a charcoal production pit or any archaeological feature is to recover what we call ecofacts. So these would be organic remains like wood, charcoal, seeds, cereal grains, hazelnuts that will be preserved within the actual fill of the feature. So this could be mixed in with the soil that has fallen into the feature, or it could be the remains of some of the material that was burnt within the feature itself.
We find charcoal production pits often in generally flat, open pasture lands. They are often found singly, or as we have here behind me, in clusters. They are often located further away from settlements so as not to pollute the daily living space, but they would be within a close enough distance to be tended to. They would also be located nearby a source of wood, most often oak. While charcoal production pits can occur from prehistory all the way throughout to post-medieval, there is a general peak in their use from the 9th to the 13th centuries, and that proves relevant here because nearby these charcoal production pits behind me, we have excavated a bivalette enclosure that's dated into the early medieval, possibly. Also nearby, we have excavated a moated site, and there we have found a lot of finds, including a lot of iron objects.
To produce charcoal, they need to do a very slow combustion of the wood. So for this means is why they have to dig a pit into the ground, stock all the piles with the wood, and then trying to make a fire that go really slow to produce charcoal. There is 3 different stages that we went through in the process of digging a charcoal producing pit. The first one is called pre-excavation, that we need to know the full extension of the charcoal producing pit before we start. So this is being the cleaning by hand by an archaeologist and expose the whole thing. Then we will take photograph, measurement, etc. The second stage will be to cross a half section into the pit. So we empty just one of the half of the actual feature, and that will let us know to have a section with the different fields that are actually filling this charcoal producing pit. We do planning and we do a drawing of these sections, and after that, taking our notes, we go through the third stage. That will be to empty the other half, take some samples that will be sent to the lab.
In charcoal production pits, the samples are vital for our understanding because they can tell us about fuel selection strategies by determining what type of wood was used, and also can tell us how old the site was by getting radiocarbon dates. What a lot of pollen studies have shown us is in these kind of periods you had a mixed woodland in the area of oak, elm, birch, hazel and ash. And what we tend to find from these charcoal production pits is that they're deliberately selecting oak. So that can tell us a lot about how the actual environment and how the resources are managed by people in the past. So the on-site excavations are only the very first part of our archaeological investigations. Once the samples have been taken on site, we bring them back to our post-excavation facilities here in Kilrush and County Clare, where the samples are put through the flotation tank to separate the soil sediments from the ecofacts. Then they are sorted and sieved, having been dried previously. Then they are sent to our specialists who analyse the wood and charcoal found within the sediments and tell us what exactly was happening at the site based on this analysis.
We use the flotation tank to process soil samples that come from site. The aim of using the tank is to gently break up the soil by agitating it with water. Ecofacts such as charcoal or charred grains will float to the top and get caught in a fine mesh sieve, while the remnants that we call retent sinks to the bottom and gets caught in our 1mm mesh. The silt that's left over goes through 3 tanks and settles in each one. When the retent and the charcoal and ecofacts, which we call flat, are separated, they're put in drying trays and then brought to the drying room, which they will stay there for about 2 weeks until dry.
The sorting process begins once the soil sample has dried out in the drying room, and we bring it here into our processing room. And the first thing that we'll do is separate the soil sample out into various size increments. So we use greater than 10 millimeters, 5 to 10 millimeters, 2 to 5 millimeters, and less than 2 millimeters. Separating it out just makes it a bit visually easier for us to sort through the material. As we are sorting through the material, we essentially just take tweezers and we bit by bit look through the material and extract any charcoal that didn't float, any seeds that didn't float, and any other archaeologically interesting material that is contained within the retent. So what we're looking for when we are sorting through these soil samples are essentially clues to tell us how this feature or this area of the site was being used in the past. With our charcoal production pit, for example, we are finding tons and tons of charcoal within this sample. That is what gives us this clue that charcoal was being produced in this area here. With another feature where we may not be finding as much charcoal, but we're finding a lot of charred seeds, things like that, that may be an indication that that area was used as a kiln for drying cereal grains, such as barley. All of these things are clues that tell us how people in the past were living and working in these places that we are excavating.
What we do is we identify different species of charcoal. So for example, hazel, oak, alder, willow. The way that we identify it is all the charcoal is small black fragments that have all been carbonized. And we identify them by breaking them onto 3 planes and looking at it through a metallurgical microscope and a stereo microscope. The species identified in this charcoal production pit is all oak. Oak was commonly used for charcoal production both in Britain and in Ireland. The charcoal can tell us that at Curraghbridge 1 to 3 that the people were probably selecting oak specifically for use in the charcoal production pits. It can also tell us that the site was probably located within an oak woodlands, as in the past wood colliers used to camp within the oak woodlands to make and produce the charcoal in order to lessen transport costs. The charcoal can also tell us that the wood was pretty slow grown, so it suggests there wasn't optimal growth conditions, and that also people were using larger chunks or branches for the charcoal. Other uses that the charcoal will be used for is mainly radiocarbon dating.
It's fascinating how much information we can get from one site and from one small piece of charcoal from that site. The sample can show us a lot about how people lived in the past, but also tell us about the environment in which they lived. It really demonstrates the collaborative nature of archaeology, from the team on site during excavation who will identify, excavate and record the feature, to the post-excavation team who will process the samples and analyse the remains, give us a greater picture and insight into how people lived in the past.